Hello, everyone. So climate change mitigation and energy supply security requires significant challenges and changes to our current policies. So there are different opportunities surrounding gas and electricity, but in addition, there are new possibilities to extract unconventional fossil fuels such as shale gas, and all these challenges will require a tight coupling of different energy resources, fossil fuels, nuclear and renewables to match all energy production and demand at any time and to meet the targets. So our aims for this work was to analyze the role of different energy resources in order to reduce system costs and emissions. And in order to do that, we try first to review existing energy scenario studies and to understand them. And then we propose two energy scenarios, and we propose a time framework for action to manage various resources integration. And then we explore options which reduce carbon emissions. And a very important part from our research was to discuss policies needed for different energy industries to enable different development trajectories. And we did that back in July through a workshop where we invited different stakeholders, and we asked them to propose different energy policies and then to vote for them, and we took into account these energy policies in our scenarios. So we assessed in total 19 studies for the UK with time horizon 2010 to 2050. The 3 studies we pick up here, and I'm just showing to you, were published all in 2006. They all assess the future development of a UK electricity system and all hold 2010 as an intermediate assessment horizon. So that allowed us to assess the projections against the actual values. So the 3 studies I picked up here are the ILEC study for WWF, the DTI study for the government, and Friends of Earth study. And each of the studies assess multiple scenarios which differ by aspects such as policy assumptions, fuel prices, and technological development. So just to give you an example, the ILEC study, for example, has business as usual scenario, policy delivery scenario, which looks at delivering current policy as it was in 2006, and policy evolution scenario, which looks at additional policies which has to be introduced. So if we go, here we go to the results. So this is coal, gas, nuclear, and renewable generation for electricity. All these are for to compare with 2010. So what we did is calculate the maximum and minimum for values produced by these scenarios. And just to give you as an example for the gas generation, the ILEC study with the business as usual scenario projects the most accurate consumption profile. I'm not sure if, do we have a pointer? No, no? Oh, okay, however. So it shows the most accurate results, and okay, this one. This could be due to the fact that low relative coal prices incentivize its use to satisfy high energy demand. Then here we have electricity generation and CO2 emissions, and the DTI study suggests a highly optimistic scenario which significantly reduces electricity generation, while the FOE produces significant higher results. However, one reason for the difference between the DTI and the other studies is due to the amount of electricity imports and the combined heat and power capacity, which is not included in their scenarios. Then we have the CO2 emissions. This is the maximum and minimum from the power sector produced by the 3 studies. And this indicates that the DTI scenario, the central case, projected highly accurate CO2 emissions in 2010. And the ILEC studies projects this lower emission in 2010 in all cases, and that was due to the assumption of more efficient generation. So mainly what we try to do is to show that this analysis of similar studies, which were conducted at similar times, So as I said, from 2006 to 2010, highlights the significant differences between input values, among input values, calculation methodologies, and also subsequent production of highly varied results. So what we did, part of our project was to come up with two scenarios. So historically, the UK is a country that relied on coal, nuclear, and offshore natural gas. However, in the next decade, a fifth of Britain's existing capacity is scheduled to close. The North Sea oil and gas is in decline, and the global market for these products is volatile. So within this context, we looked at the UK policies aiming to transform the current system, and as yin and yang, with opposing forces, which both conflicts and reinforce, we propose two scenarios for the development of a UK energy system. So it's mainly a cauldron of contradictions which work together as yin and yang. So mainly our vision was to explore energy trends fluctuation through the time through two pathways, each of them with 4 steps. So we use 2 iconic dances as a metaphoric basis for our proposed scenarios, Zorba and Kalinka. And the questions was raised was that what kind of dance should policymakers practice in their work? So under each scenario, the period until 2020 is full of uncertainties, and for that reason we call the black step. By 2013, policymakers must have devised, committed, and implemented long-term decarbonization policies, and for that reason we call it a gray step. And towards 2040, issues regarding implementation and management of a new system configuration should largely be clear, and is the blue step. And by 2050, the goal of significant decarbonization of a system should be achieved, so we all become green. So just to give you an idea about results from our study, the main diversification between the scenarios, Zorba and Kalinka, is observed after about 2030, the gray step, as in 2020, none of the major transformation has been completed or established. So in Kalinka, the use of coal will be eliminated by 2030 in the black step, so as the majority of coal-fired plants is projected to retire by 2023, 2025. So nuclear has a backup role and accounts for about 7% in 2050 in order to facilitate energy security in case the weather condition inhibit electricity generation from wind power. Bioenergy also contributes considerably in the resource mix from 2020, reaching about 15% between 2040 and 2050. Biomass, wind energy shares high levels in the primary energy supply from 2030, and by 2050 accounts of about 12% in the total energy supply. So in Zorba scenario, this scenario includes much more like a greener step, which incorporates significant use of renewables energy. However, nuclear power is projected to be increased compared to the Kalinka, where participating in about 16% of the total energy supply by 2050. Wind and bioenergy are the two main alternative sources deployed in large levels in both scenarios. Although in Zorba, the investments in wind farms are much higher than in Kalinka. Also, pump heat has a contribution mainly after 2040, reaching about 7% in 2050. So in terms of CO2 emissions, so these are the emissions reductions which focus on 2020, 2030, and 2050, as the UK emission targets are focused on these 3 milestones. So Zorba projects the most sustainability pathway for the UK in 2020. The reduction equals with about 38%, which is missing the UK target for 42% reduction in 2020. So this is due to the fact that most of the efficient technologies and investment in research and demonstration are not established yet. However, Zorba attains to comply with the fourth carbon budget targets for 60% reduction in 2030. So the success of Zorba to reach the lowest levels of decarbonization by 2050 is attributed to the high deployment of geosequestration techniques along with effective use of land for biocrops production. In Kalinka scenarios, also there are efforts towards the UK decarbonization with extensive use of carbon capture and large scale of biocrops cultivation, and it succeeds to reduce its emission by about 65% in 2030 and by 77% in 2050, managing to achieve almost both targets. A very important bit to mention here is what policies we considered following our workshops. So one important policy was the development and demonstration of commercial viable CCS was voted as the key priority for both the coal and gas industries, mainly because CO2 emissions was seen as a key challenge for these industries. So in Kalinka, for example, the extension of a lifespan of existing nuclear plants was voted as the priority for nuclear power. And in Zorba, the most important policy was considered to be the provision for research and demonstration into grid management to enable the combination of relatively static nuclear generation with stochastic renewables. So what we did next is to look at the literature review, considering different studies, and we just to give you an idea about the comparison with the existing studies. So high electrification was not achieved for Zorba and Kalinka completely until 2050, where the projection for these two scenarios are increased compared to the majority and the rest of the studies. However, none of the scenarios proposed in our project manages to achieve so high reduction as for national grid scenarios, accelerated growth and slow progression, which mainly they succeeded to surmount the national targets and achieve that 49% and 53% reduction. However, in 2050, apart from the Tyndall decarbonization scenarios, the purple scenario, that forecast high energy intensity improvement coupled with larger economic growth, causing energy demand to increase enormously, Kalinka and Zorba project higher levels of demand supply as they incorporate many renewables and less thermal generation and improvements in transport electrification. So just to conclude, so in existing scenario studies, significant variation was noted in most metrics. There is a lack of certainty in producing future scenarios that produce results over even the shortest time horizons, as I show you. And in our scenarios, whereas both Kalinka and Zorba achieve long-term decarbonization and share commonalities, they each result from different short-term priorities of energy trilemma, energy security, energy affordability, and emission mitigation. So Zorba projects a more secure energy system with reduced imports, but with higher levels of capital investment, while Kalinka requires low levels of investment. So we need to adopt a more hybridized approach for assessing future UK energy scenarios and to inform the government what then should play. So for more information, please visit our website, UCL UK Energy Networks and Policy. You can find there our final report presentations from the workshop and everything else. Thank you.
We have a couple of minutes still for questions.
Hi, I'm a PhD researcher at the Energy Institute. I was wondering, so you said that let me get this right, the Zorba scenario, which is mostly a renewable mix, requires higher capital investment, but the Kalinka requires a lot of CCS to work.
Yes.
How is it that that doesn't require high capital investment, or do you count research and development as separate from that investment? Since there's no currently working like successful CCS projects.
It requires high capital investments, but as I show you, mainly it requires between 2020 and 2030. So after from 2030 is getting more established, so less investments, because you already think that CCS is going to be established by that point. In comparing with renewables, when you have to make investments from now until 2050 to achieve the targets at the end.
we have any other questions?
Thank you. I'm probably going to regret asking questions later when it's my turn to speak up there. But I have another question relating to carbon capture, and it's my ignorance really. But my understanding was that CCS is kind of most historically being tested on coal-fired power stations, and the scenarios that you showed looked like coal would be phased out. I think you said by 2030.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering kind of how that matches up, and how well CCS is developed for other energy sources like biomass and potentially oil-powered fired power stations.
So as you saw in, I can go back to this one. So as you can see here from the primary energy supply scenarios, I probably use this one. So you can see that coal after 2020 is going to disappear. Then you have more variations in different energy resources, and that will include also the transformation of existing power plants into more efficient one, and also more investments into the CCS.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have one more. Just a quick one, yeah.
I would have a question if that's
Yeah.
all right. So I'm Victor Nekifor from the Institute for Sustainable Resources. I was wondering, for these two scenarios, how are they compatible with the liberalized energy market that's really been pushed for by the European Commission in an attempt to create even a wider European single market for gas and power?
Yeah, we try to take into consideration the European targets, of course. As you can see, we are going to miss through Zorba the initial targets in 2020, but then we are going to rapidly come up with solutions, and by 2050 we are going to achieve the targets. In terms of, as you can see, we have two pathways. One is going with more nuclear, for example, and nuclear is going to stay there, despite the fact that European Commission is encouraging to not invest more money into the nuclear. But in order to have security, energy security, then you need to have a backup. So for that reason, we consider nuclear in both scenarios.
Okay, thank you.